Hi. Uh, what I want to do in this opening presentation is to talk to you a bit, kind of just to give you a sense of who I am and kind of to set up the course introduction. And what will happen with each module, everything we work through in any given week, it'll start off with a presentation that is ad-libbed and um, directly intended for you, the students who are taking the course here at the moment. Most of the other presentations are recorded with the idea of being able to use them more than once, which is why sometimes I may use a year, specify a year like January 6, 2022, even though that happens to be today or last week or what have you. So that's the reality of the case. So the first presentation will always be directed to you. We'll comment on the course and the status of it, and so on. And then the others will mostly be recorded again with the idea of using them more than once. Now, the two things that I want to cover this week are the course introduction itself, to give you a good orientation to how the course operates. And secondly, to talk about the personal challenge assignment, which I regard as really the most significant assignment because it's more or less unique. You're not going to take many courses where you'll have the opportunity to stretch yourself in terms of something that is important to you, some kind of goal that perhaps you've thought about wanting to do but haven't quite had the motivation to do it yet, or know how to do it. This can be something like working on procrastination. A lot of us have real difficulty with that. It might have to do with weight control. That's always a good one for me. Or exercising more, also something I could do to do more of. There are things that you can do to improve your emotional and mental health. So you may not understand just yet how that personal challenge assignment relates to the course, but it does. And the presentations in the latter part of the week are intended to explain to you the relevance of that assignment to the course. But right now, let me talk a little bit about the course itself, American Military History to 1903, by way of looking at what's in the background, what's behind me. Now, most of you know that you all know that you're watching a recording of a presentation that was made using Zoom. And as most of you know, Zoom permits users to place so-called virtual backgrounds behind them so that others won't see how badly they suck at housekeeping. I'll be making frequent use of virtual backgrounds, partly to disguise the fact that I suck badly at housekeeping, but mainly to introduce a new subject or to make a pedagogical point. So behind me, you're seeing part of a gigantic painting called the Gettysburg Cyclorama, which depicts the climactic moment on the third day of this major Civil War battle fought in July 1863, in which Confederate forces briefly but unsuccessfully pierced the Union defensive line. And the attack is famously called Pickett's Charge. And this moment is often called the high watermark of the Confederacy, the moment in which Confederate fortunes peaked and then began to recede, ultimately to final defeat in the spring of 1865. Throughout the course, we're going to touch upon the Gettysburg campaign from time to time, even in the early weeks of the course. And when we reach the Civil War, we're going to examine the Gettysburg campaign in detail. And one of the books required for the course deals specifically with that campaign. But it's worth taking a moment to talk about the Gettysburg Cyclorama itself. And parenthetically, what you're going to see during this course, and there's no help for it, is you're going to see me periodically looking off to my left because that's where you can't really see it with the background, but there you go. kind of appears and disappears. That is the script from which I'm working. And believe me, you don't want the alternative where I'm sort of hum and ha and ad-libbing all the way through. So anyway, to get back to the main thing, I'm going to take a moment and talk about the Gettysburg Cyclorama itself. I said before that you were looking at part of the cyclorama because the whole canvas is 42 feet high and 377 feet long, and it's circular in shape, so that viewers are literally surrounded by the painting. And that's uncannily like being plunked down in the middle of this dramatic moment, particularly since three-dimensional objects, wagon wheels, ammunition chests, and so on have been placed in the foreground, as that the cannon that's over my my right shoulder. And this cyclorama was created by the French painter Philippe Philippotteau and 5 assistants over the course of 18 months. And it was first unveiled in 1883, 2 decades after the battle. And the fact that Philippotteau chose this as his subject gives you an idea of just how significant Americans regarded the Battle of Gettysburg. He knew that it would be a subject that would attract a large audience. But this wasn't the only cyclorama that Philippotteau created. In the 19th century, cycloramas were a popular form of entertainment, and the vast canvases were rolled up like scrolls and transported from one large city to another, where they were again placed on display, and thousands of spectators paid good money for the chance to experience being inside these cycloramas for a few minutes. It was the 19th century equivalent of an IMAX theater. With the advent of motion pictures, cycloramas lost their popularity. Most were lost or destroyed. One was cut up to make tents. But the Gettysburg cyclorama survives. In 2005, it was thoroughly renovated and can now be viewed at the Gettysburg National Military Park Visitor Center and Museum. And this photo, in fact, was taken with some friends of mine, and I viewed the cyclorama during a sort of a trip around the Gettysburg battlefield that we took together in August 2021. Now, the cyclorama, this is the pedagogical part of things, the cyclorama illustrates what comes to mind when most people think of war. Most people think about what goes on in a military history course. They think in terms of two armies locked in desperate, dramatic battle. But war is a much broader subject than the cyclorama suggests. And it has many aspects that may come as a surprise to you as we progress through the course. So, and this basic insight that war is much broader than battles and campaigns is central to this course. And so, depending on the expectations that you brought with you into this course, you may initially find it disappointing that we won't be dealing primarily with great commanders and great battles and great acts of daring do. But hang in there. We won't ignore such things altogether. We're going to work in detail with the Gettysburg campaign precisely to give you a sense of what warfare was like in mid-19th century America, and to deal with command issues and face of battle issues and so forth. So we're not going to ignore things like that entirely. But some of the things that you're going to learn in this course are things that you didn't anticipate, and some of those things may very well be the things that you remember most about the course when it's over. Now here it says ad lib personal background. That's me to tell you a little bit about myself. I was once upon a time, just like you, an undergraduate right here at the Ohio State University. I matriculated. I came into Ohio State when I was 17 years old, not quite 18. And this was back in autumn quarter. We were on the quarter system way back when, of 1977. Um, why did I come to Ohio State? Frankly, I didn't appreciate just how good a university it was. I came here because it was close and it was cheap. At that particular time, if you wanted to, you could pay your way through through college, and I did that myself much of the time. My parents sort of started off um, paying my way, and then I took it over myself over time. You can't do that anymore. But I was a commuter student, and so I missed out a lot on the university experience. And I hope that that whether you're living on campus or off campus or whatever, you'll immerse yourself in that experience because there's a lot of life that goes on this campus, and don't miss out on it. I graduated, got my bachelor's degree. Sometimes people said, you know, Mark, you might make a good professor. You should think about that. But my view when I heard that was, then you might make a good egghead, Mark. So I didn't regard that as entirely as a compliment. But I was fascinated by history, and indeed, when I was a teenager, one of my English teachers thought that I could write for publication and encouraged me to do that. And I began to sort of work with that objective in mind, and wound up publishing an article in a popular history magazine when I was 20 years old. It was kind of cool. But I got out of Ohio State. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do next, and one of my professors suggested, "Well, go to London and get your master's degree in war studies at King's College, London." And after a stint of initial active duty training in the Army, the National Guard specifically, I went off to London, spent a year there, got that master's degree, came back, and entered Ohio State for my PhD work, because Ohio State happens to have, back then and still does, the best military history program in the country. And that's not, local chauvinism. That is something that is widely acknowledged. Well, the last thing I expected was what in fact happened, which was, as I neared the end of my PhD and was working on my dissertation, an opportunity arose to apply for a military history position with a specialization in early American military history. And I competed. I was allowed to compete against other people in the country. It was a national search. And to my surprise, I got the job. And the reason why I say I was surprised to get the job is because it's rare, very rare, for somebody to be hired directly out of a graduate program onto the faculty. The idea would be you've learned so much of the way that the other faculty think that you're not going to contribute sort of an intellectual, sort of your own intellectual vision of how things operate. So you're better off if you go to another institution. And so I started off going to Ohio State because it was close and cheap. And I have been at Ohio State in one way or another for the better part of my life. And it's had its ups and downs. It's been a good career path for me. I love history. This is a chance to do something that I love and make money at it, and that's awesome. But faculty meetings aren't the greatest thing in the world. Academic politics aren't the greatest thing in the world either. But teaching students is. Teaching students is really a wonderful experience. And during my early years on the faculty, I won 3 teaching awards, including the top teaching award here at The Ohio State. And I'll tell you what, even what I'd prefer to do is probably what you would prefer as well, which is to meet together face to face in a regular classroom or lecture hall and be able to interact directly. And of course, the pandemic makes that difficult for us to do. But there's another reason why I'm choosing to teach online anyway. And that reason, to be candid with you, and I talk about this a lot, is that I have bipolar disorder, which is a mood disorder that is caused by a biochemical abnormality in the brain that sort of artificially raises and lowers one's mood. And with me, the highs are well controlled, the lows, the depressions are more intractable. And a couple of years ago, well, back in 2019, I had an experience where I just fell into a clinical depression, into a trough. Um, and it was so bad and so protracted that it got so that I was unable to meet my classes often enough. And it looked for a bit as if I was going to have to turn over the class to another instructor. Fortunately, I was able to rally. And part of that ability to rally came from the support that I received from the students in my class who understood what I was going through and empathized with it, and gave me a lot of encouragement that enabled me to rally and to complete the course. But these depressions are a fact of life for me. And one of the things that was suggested, and I found it was a good idea, was to teach online, because you can front load a lot of what's involved with teaching online. You can record the lectures and you can have the quizzes all set and so on. So once it's up and running, if you're having a bad day or 2 bad days or whatever, it's not a disaster. The students are still going to get, what they need to get from the course. And so that's one reason that I'm teaching online, kind of a big reason for teaching online. But now that I'm doing it, I tell you what, I find it kind of fascinating, because to do it well involves a certain amount of creativity. And so it's been a lot of work building online courses. But I found that the work, by and large, is enjoyable. And one of the things that I have found to be a challenge, though, that I'm working on, that I'm really interested in sort of cracking the code on this, is how to make this online course as much like a face-to-face experience as possible, which is to say, to try to generate the connection with students between me and you, and the connection between you students with one another, to bring the dynamic of the course as close to that of a face-to-face course as is possible. So that's enough about me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop now, and the next thing you're going to see is a recorded presentation that focuses on the course architecture, followed by an orientation to the major readings that we're going to be doing for the course. Now, here's the part that's always kind of awkward. I go down here and I stop recording. Oh, this isn't that hard. The hard part is when I'm sharing a PowerPoint presentation. Then it looks like the wrath of God when I'm shutting things down. But in this particular instance, all I've got to do is hit the stop recording button and I'm home free. So take a minute, take half an hour, take a whole day, if you like, and then move on to the next presentation. Okay.